Right. Good evening, everyone. Ooh, that's a funny noise happening here. I don't know. Okay, that seems to be fun. Right, welcome to this evening's meeting of the Waste Disposal Task and Finish Group. So the meeting this evening will be live streamed to the public. A recording of the public part of the meeting will be available on the Council's website within 24 hours of the meeting. If members and officers could please remember to switch their microphones on when speaking and speak directly into the microphone, and switch it off when finished speaking. Please switch your mobile phones off or put them on silent. If you need to answer a call, please leave the chamber and return when finished. Lovely. Councillor Bridgen. I don't like that noise. Okay. Just before we get started, Sean and Sue have to leave us at 7, so we need to get rid of our technical questions early. But have I got any apologies for absence?
None, Chair.
Perfect. We'll see if Councillor Bridgen comes. And has everyone read the minutes? No. Do you let me know if there's any comments or questions on the minutes, or if I can sign them as an accurate record? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to take that as we're happy with the minutes. Okie dokie. Perfect. Right, so do we have any disclosures of interest?
None that I'm aware of, Chair.
Thank you. No urgent business?
None.
We've got no references from committees or other bodies?
None, Chair.
So, right, you have before you the draft final report. So, this is our last opportunity to make recommendations for our draft final report. Currently, at what number is it? Right, on page 26, points 143 and 144, you will see the proposals that are currently in the draft report, and that is that the Waste Disposal Task and Finish Group supports the renewal of the waste disposal contract for the disposal of Luton's household waste in line with, that's supposed to say net zero is 1T, net zero carbon and other sustainable principles, but also recognises the need to encourage residents to increase recycling rates in line with the waste hierarchy, and welcomes the extended producer responsibility legislation due to come in 2024. The second recommendation currently in the draft report is that the Task and Finish Group recommends the executive to undertake further feasibility work regarding the option of bringing the service in-house in the future or other delivery models, but notes that the Task and Finish Group are unable to comment further given financial detail not being available to them. Now, on option 2, we have in front of us a report on the financial overview. So if you could peruse that is on option 2 in regards to the financial overview of bringing the service in-house. Okay? Right, over to David.
Okay, I've got two points to make, really. But on on this question of bringing the service in-house, I personally would prefer the paragraph 144, because although the paper that's presented to us this evening is very useful and there's clearly been some work put into producing it, we have not had time or an opportunity to question it, to probe, and to find out, exactly where it leads. I wouldn't want to make a choice simply on the basis of a couple of sides of A4 presented to us as we arrived at the meeting. So for me, the paragraph 144, which simply says we recommend executive to probe because we have not had sufficient information during the course of our proceedings, that is my preference. If you want to move on and see what other people's views are on that, I'd like to come back with something on a separate issue, please.
May I just come through? In principle, I agreed with what Councillor Franks has just said. My inclination was, I suppose, even more drastic than Councillor Franks. My view was that initially when I had read this draft report, which, by the way, I think is a superb attempt to pull together in the time that's been available the work that's been done. However, on paragraph 144, my inclination was to say, no, I don't agree, because I feel that we as a council have got enough issues to worry about in the timescales that we're talking about here, not to burden ourselves with a further set of issues. So my view goes a little bit more strongly than even that expressed by David Franks.
Okay.
Yeah, if you'd like me to, I'll propose that we take paragraph 144 and David Wynne and anyone else who feels inclined can vote against it, can't they? I don't have a problem with that. Well, if you're asking me, I don't have any questions on it because I haven't had time to go through it properly. I thank the officers for producing it. There's clearly a fair amount of work gone into it. But if we're going to probe it at all, and frankly, we should have been doing that some time ago. I think it's too late now. I'm proposing that our response is as per paragraph 144.
And you change the wording to, you're suggesting a slight change to the wording though?
I don't...
Sorry.
No, I don't think we need to change anything.
No?
No.
The current wording is to undertake further feasibility work, yeah?
Yep, quite happy
Okay.
for executive to undertake
That's fine.
further work.
Because that doesn't... okay, perfect. Okay. Do we want to take a vote whether we're happy with that proposal then? If Councillor Wynne is not, or do we want to just keep 144 as it is? I don't really know what the...
I can just come back for a moment, Chair. Like my colleagues, we've only just seen this, and just a cursory look. If we're just starting from the point of view that we've now just had this financial overview. That would suggest that maybe it was appropriate for that to go forward. I wasn't expecting the financial overview this evening because it wasn't forecast to be available for today. So I think given the financial overview and given the fact that the financial overview says more work is required, then yes, I will actually go along with the fact that section 144 can stay.
Okay, that's fine. So, and that recommendation, we are essentially just asking them to look at the feasibility work, and we're not necessarily going to make a recommendation either way because we haven't had time to dissect this. Perfect. So we're happy to keep 144 as it is? Yeah. Okay. Right. On the proposals / options, do we have more we would like to add? Because this is the final point we can choose what we're going to add. Yes, Councillor Franks.
Yeah, it's a particular issue for me, incineration. So I would like us to make a specific recommendation on incineration. I've drafted something which I'll circulate now, and for the Democratic Services people's benefit, I'll email it to you so you don't have to type it all out again. Basically, what it says is it gives disadvantages of incineration and advantages, and says that we recommend the use of incineration be continued and landfill minimised, whilst at the same time seeking a more environment-friendly and less health-threatening alternatives. Okay. I'll circulate it now if that's okay with you. If I may suggest, Chair, a suitable place for inserting it might be after paragraph 81 on page 19, but I'm quite happy to take advice on exactly where it should be inserted. Paragraph 81 and a half. It might be appropriate, Chair, to ask the officers if they want to comment on it.
Yes. Move on to... Right, Sean. Sue. Would you like to comment on what's been circulated.
Just obviously on the final decisions and stuff like that, that goes through the executive and the normal governance process. But there's no problem about putting that into the procurement and asking people to explain the options out there, EFW and other technologies, if they're available, you know, in the local area. As you said, Section 81 also talks about EFW is not the final long-term solution. Currently, it helps with the grid capacity, but things move on, you know, so that's within 5-10 years, there'll be something else will come along. So, yeah, no problems.
Thank you for that, Sean. From my perspective, incineration is probably the least bad solution that's available at the moment.
So essentially what we're recommending is that we continue the use of incineration whilst keeping a view to what is the most sustainable, environmentally friendly option in the future, and not necessarily wedding ourselves to continuing incineration forever. Is that what you're essentially saying? Yes. As soon as there's a more environmentally friendly option, looking at that.
Yeah, I think the essence of what it's saying, Chair, is that incineration is probably the least bad of the options that are available. Yes. So you continue to use it whilst at the same time looking for new technologies in the future, which would be better, but probably not available now.
Councillor Mead.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'd like to see somewhere or other inserted in the final report that the Council lobbies government and anybody else it can think of about legislation on packaging, in getting it reduced, making sure what is used is recyclable or better still reusable, etc. Because otherwise we're just going to keep on this vicious circle of producing packaging, etc., and it being burnt, sent to landfill. We've got to reduce what we're getting our food and products in and being able to deal with it in a more environmentally friendly way, like recycling it, reusing it, etc., etc. And I'd like to see something where we're recognise that, but that is in the hands of the government to pass legislation to force manufacturers to do it.
I believe at points 139 to 142 there are some comments that are added about reducing waste and the waste hierarchy and prevention. Perhaps maybe, Sean, there could be something added in there about the government, lobbying the government. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that matter?
I would say there's quite an extensive list of background papers, and 159 is under the appendices is the current draft proposals. So as soon as the government consult properly and try and give us a date, that's when both as a council, a region and professional bodies, the LGA as well as others, will be going back and saying basically the producer needs to pay, which Councillor Mead has quite rightly pointed out, and that is moving from that linear economy to that circular economy. So supermarkets and Tesco's give you a bit of a flavour in Appendix 11. They're all starting to chip away because they realise it's going to cost them money, quite simply. So they're all keen to do things now. And probably things like refill stations will become a lot more common. You take a packaging back and you refill it with your cornflakes or rice or whatever. So that is definitely the way to do, and we can work with committee services to put a bit more in if members wish.
Sorry, are you happy with that, Councillor Mead, that as a council we would respond to the consultation when it takes place?
Yes, I suppose so. We need to make sure that the government does its bit, and we are leaning on the government, etc., etc. Because I think with this lot we've got in at the moment, they're quite liable to have amnesia on it, and But anyway.
Excuse me, Chair, can I just come back on the same point? I think what Councillor Mead is trying to say is that relying upon the fact that there is further evidence, if people go through the process of looking up all the detailed reports and so on, is not going to be satisfactory. That really we need some reference in the report, because the majority of people will not go through any of that giant list of additional materials. They won't do it. And if I've interpreted correctly what Councillor Mead said, we need some reference to the government responsibility within the main body of the report, and not just rely upon all the various references.
So would we potentially be able to add a point on that in the other comments and queries section, as it doesn't directly relate to the waste contract?
Yes, we'll be able to do
Yeah.
that. Work with committee services.
Okay. Thank you, Sean. Right. So in front of us, do we have any questions or comments on the piece written by Councillor Franks to add to the report? No. Are we all happy to agree Councillor Franks' conclusion to add to our recommendations at point... Where is it? What number is it? Our recommendations at the start of the report, so it'd be, say, point 4. That this conclusion sentence here would be added as a recommendation to our report. With the body of David Franks's, Councillor Franks's writing going after point 81, paragraph 81.
Be happy with that.
Yes? Councillor Franks?
Could I just be absolutely clear? Is it intended that the whole of this report actually goes to executive along with our recommendations? And Angela's nodding, so I guess that means the answer is yes.
So this report here that we are producing will be presented by myself to the Overview and Scrutiny Board on the 24th of October. I wrote down the dates as well. And the 7th of November? Yes, executive at the 7th of November. So I'll be presenting this report. This whole report will be going into the meeting. Yep? Okay, so we're happy to add that to our recommendations. That is fine. Do we have any more recommendations anyone would like to add to the report? Or anything they want to raise now?
Depends very much, Chair. It's up to you. I have a number of observations which I could make. It's up to you whether you wish to indulge me in making those and see whether that's important to the other members of the committee, or whether or not we just leave it go. That's your decision, Chair.
Well, this is the last opportunity we're going to have with our officers to ask those questions, so I'm happy to ask a few of them now.
Thank you. I'll keep it as short as possible. I'm afraid I've done my usual, so I'll take them as I get to them. Right, where's the next? Where's the first one? Right. Yes, I'm on page 16, 52. You will recognise from the notes that I put through from a meeting that Councillor Mead and I had that paragraph 52, it seems to me at the moment that there may well need to be some form of national, not just Newton, but national change, because at the moment sending waste directly to landfill ends up being cheaper than any other way for the council, and I don't think that's good for us or the environment or the country. On page 17, there is a reference under paragraph 67 about St Albans, and although the process is complicated in St Albans, it is effectively where I believe we need to go. And I think we could get there if we were prepared to be more natural thinking and give people financial incentives, perhaps off council tax or whatever, to be able to put that sort of measure in place. I don't think people will voluntarily do it, but I think people might react to a financial incentive. Stop me at any point if you wish. Leave that one go. Just a comment on page 23 on 116. We appear to be doing quite well on our carbon emissions. I think we should make more noise about it. Page 24 again comes back to my point about the fact that actually we can go to a lot of trouble, but it would be cheaper for the council just to send things to landfill. Not very healthy. Yes, page 31 in the report, the all-party parliamentary group on air pollution, in the foreword to that report, I find the paragraph paragraph 6, where it's quoting Professor Vivian Howard's conclusion, I find extremely worrying. Because the point in Councillor Frank's additional document today is because it relates to the very, very tiny particles in the incineration process, and it has become more and more evident that the very small particles are beginning to even appear in the human body, even of relatively young children. And so that's the main reason why I think the change that Councillor Franks suggested is so important. It's even been found that some of the pollutants from incineration have landed up even in toenails of young children. And I found the talk of the particulates below PM 2.5 in size are becoming critically important, and they're not measured. And even when we went to our visit to Greatmore, they very keen to say how good they are at eliminating pollutants, but not at pollutants at that level of size. So I found that rather a worrying conclusion. Yeah, page 40, and I think I'd like a view, if I may, from the officers. On page 40, the fourth bullet point under concerns, it's saying landfills are taxed at £96.7 per tonne. Incinerators are not subject to any economic instrument to encourage abatement beyond permitted levels, and they face no economic instruments to pay for climate change. I can't help but think that situation isn't going to last long, and if we're using that incineration, that we're going to end up paying more money pretty damn quick.
Chair, if you're happy, that's essentially the purpose of and the proposals under the emissions trading scheme. It's not only for EFWs, it's all emissions, so whether that be from factories or otherwise. EFWs are a bit of a headline, but it's every factory, every steelworks, every facility that has an emission. So the landfill tax started at somewhere close to £2, as you quite rightly pointed out, it's close to 97. So the financial instrument is usually the blunt sword that the Treasury use to force change.
The real question is we're still banking on the fact that we can do incineration, waste to electricity, etc. Do you think there's a high risk that we're suddenly going to end up paying a huge amount more money because somebody in central government suddenly says, well, this doesn't look right?
I think there's a long-term risk, but not a short-term risk, because fiscally it takes a long time to bring that sort of economic instrument through and apply it. And at the moment, as you quite rightly said, the unintended consequence would be that landfill, which the government and councils and responsible people have spent 20 years trying to use less of, would become the cheapest and potentially the default position for some people. So I think they've got to look at it in terms of carbon, look at in terms of it instead sustainability. But there's no doubt, as Councillor Franks has said, that the long term there will be some changes. And that's why it's so important as a council, as a country, as residents, that consumption and waste prevention rise to the fore, as they are in the waste hierarchy. So effectively, we think before we buy, because if you do that, it doesn't need to be collected and then disposed of. So that's where the real savings of sustainability, carbon, and pound, shillings, and pence, as people are.
Page 74, the next to last paragraph, it's talking about the fact that we as local authorities have little or no control over the waste that's presented to us. That's why I was actually trying to say, is there some way that we could try and move towards more of the St Albans model than the model we have now, to try and give ourselves some degree of control? Because I recognise the statement on page 74 is correct, but it's not a good way for us to be if we can avoid it.
Just to come back to that, effectively, householders and residents are currently exempt from most environmental legislation. The legislation which bin collections have done is quite old. It's the 70s and early 80s. But the hope is that with some of the proposed legislation, that carbon sustainability becomes a lot more of a factor, where you have to calculate carbon, and that's taken into account when you do any scheme, when a supermarket puts any product on the market. And going back to your point 10, 15 minutes ago, that extended producer responsibility for packaging is key to that, because that will hit supermarkets, Amazon, everybody in the pocket, and then that will fund all the changes. That's the current proposal. Whether or not that gets watered down, not that close to the government.
Final question then, just to close this out. In the timescales we're looking at here, let's say, for the sake of argument, the next 7 to 10 years, do you think that the way we're headed is going to expose us to much greater risk? And what odds would you put on the fact, because you know better than I do, what odds would you put on the fact that this is going to become prohibitively expensive if we carry on down the same track?
I would say it's not a question of just Luton, it's a question of a national picture. We can't keep consuming. The supply chains over the last couple of years, where there's been shortages of the proverbial toilet paper, have shown how reliant we are, and we've got to get better. So the exposure to risk is for us all, and that's why that waste hierarchy, that prevention, that reuse, that recycle, recovery is so important, because you can apply it to virtually everything from bicycles through to food, to shopping, to cooking, to books even. So that is going to be the change, that cultural and behaviour change, where it isn't so cheap to buy something that you can just discard it. The right to repair is a factor. The £7 kettle. They're all going to come to the fore, I think, and it's a change of culture. It'll be a generational change, and it's not always the older or the younger people who are the changers. There's quite a bit of focus on people out there.
So do you think we should continue down this track, or do you as a professional in this field feel that we ought to start making changes now? My feeling is, for what it's worth, that although we might not be able to do it immediately, we should head towards the St Albans model.
Whether or not we end up with a curbside collection system, which is similar to St Albans, will come back to the fact that all the producers of the packaging are going to pay for that service, because they need to pay local authorities for the service, because we're at the end of that supply chain. It's already been bought, it's already been transported, it's already been done, so they need to fund, and that's the whole thing about the extended producer responsibility. It's almost a taxation to fund that, but very quickly manufacturers, supermarkets will find a way to be more sustainable, because it will be cheaper for them. And then that's when we, as a local authority, need to lead and show our residents how to do it.
Perfect. So, while we have the officers here, do we have any further questions on the content of our report, or any technical questions we'd like to cover? No? Perfect. Do we have any further comments on our recommendations? No? So are we all happy to agree the recommendations as set out at point 2, paragraph 2 of our report, with the additional recommendation from Councillor Franks? Yes? Okay. Is there anything else we need to cover? No? Perfect. So, thank you very much. That was really helpful. I will be presenting our report at Overview and Scrutiny Board on the 24th and at the Executive then. Lovely. If you do suddenly have any burning questions, send us an email. I'm sure someone will be happy to answer them. Okay.
Just one further comment, Chair,
Absolutely,
just
go
so
ahead.
that you know. I'd just like to repeat my thanks to the officers for the production of this report, which was quite a large effort given all of the materials that we've gone through. And I'd like to just make sure that I record my thanks to the officers for doing that.
Thank you very much. I concur completely. Can we put a comment in the minutes that thank you for your hard work pulling all of that large amount of information into quite a succinct report. Thank you.